All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Avengers versus X-Men versus Eternals Judgment Day and the return of the Phoenix Force, which I am ridiculously excited about. By the way, yes, the new trailer for Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania came out. Yes, we'll be doing it here on Comics Explained instead of Geek Culture Explained because I don't want to burn myself out. And that video will be here later on this week. So, having said that, this is ridiculously cool. And there's a lot of history that goes into this, right? So, we're going to have a field day with this story because it's absolutely amazing. So, one of the things to remember is that when you have the kind of Unity Squad, which is basically what this is, Iron Man, Jean Grey, you do have like Logan and like some of the other Eternals who were here. This is their second attempt at a strike force. And this is what we talked about before. The first attempt at the strike force was to basically hit like what was essentially the kill switch for the progenitor celestial. This one is more of trying to find a way to destroy it from the inside out. Now, initially they thought they could be sneaky and get on board. But the funny thing about this, and this just shows the level of power the progenitor celestial has and its lack of concern, is that even when they're inside of it, it's still testing them. So the last video that we did focused on the test of Iron Man, of Tony Stark, testing his character to see whether or not he's worthy of surviving. With Jean Grey, it's much the same way here. The funny thing about this is that when this goes down, as they're making their way to the heart of the Celestial, so to speak, that Jean Grey is able to help them deal with some of the forces to a degree, but then her test begins, and she's suddenly yanked back to the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. Now, this is one of the cool moments, and there is a little bit of history here. So for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with Jean Grey, when she initially appeared in Marvel Comics, she literally showed up in X-Men issue number 1 and was kind of our eyes and ears as the reader, meaning she was given a tour of the entire grounds by Professor Xavier. She was told what the X-Men were, what their purpose is, why they do what they do, that kind of thing. But there was a story that was written later on by Chris Claremont in Bizarre Adventures issue number 27. And what this did is it actually told us Xavier had been watching Jean Grey for quite some time. That this was actually included later on in the X-Men Origins Jean Grey one-shot, but the way the story was originally written is that when Jean Grey was a little girl, her friend Annie died. And when that happened, she kind of sent out this sort of telepathic shockwave, like an SOS, right? Like a telepathic scream of anguish, if you want to call it that. Xavier picked up on it, but so did the Phoenix Force. And both of them basically watched Jean Grey. The Phoenix Force watched her knowing that Jean Grey was the kind of person who would eventually become the host of the Phoenix, and Xavier watched her because he realized how powerful she was telepathically and telekinetically. And so this is why she was originally brought on the X-Men team. Now, unlike what we saw in the Iron Man one-shot that we covered in the last video, where it's strictly confined in the mind of Iron Man, this one actually shows us what other people are doing, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a jump back and forth. But the reality is, for the most part, they come to the consensus, this is Jean Grey's test. Jean Grey has to be the one to endure it, but there will be a kind of stepping in that does take place. But the Celestial continuing to prod her mind, showing her these parts of herself and forcing her to confront these aspects that she had largely wanted to get rid of, it basically takes her mind to the Quiet Council when they were initially trying to decide what they were going to do with the progenitor celestial. And the reality here is the discussion as it took place was a discussion of, okay, what's best for the world? How do we handle this? So on and so forth. The real meat and potatoes of this discussion was that the Quiet Council didn't really care how their actions impacted normal mutants who were out there, or even just regular human beings. Because ever since the process of resurrection was mastered by mutants, they've become very cavalier with the lives of mutants. And this manifests in the way in which the discussion is presented to Jean Grey. If we succeed, it will almost certainly kill untold millions of distinctly unfashionable dressed humans. But perhaps it's still a worthwhile use of our time. Of course, we won't tell the foot soldiers, no need for the little people to know. Anybody object? Please raise your hands. And it's one of those things where it's like, Jean Grey, you have blood on your hands, right? And that's the crazy thing, is because her response is, no, I left the Quiet Council because I wanted to be a hero. I wanted to actually do things that could make a difference. But the response of the progenitor celestial here is, that may be, but you left the position that gave you the best chance of doing so. The best thing you could have done was stay on the Quiet Council. They're the ones who make the decisions. Leaving a position of power under the guise of wanting to affect actual change, that's a lie. It's a lie you tell yourself, and it's a lie you tell the world. What you did, Jean Grey, was an act of hubris. You wanted to be the hero, so you cooked up some kind of an excuse that made you feel better, and now you get to go out there and be the hero. And so she initially again tries to reject this idea of mind games, and so there actually comes a point when Mr. Sinister brings himself and Wolverine into his mind, or into the mind of the Celestial and the mind of Jean Grey. And what it does is it allows the Celestial to scan the two of them as what are basically character witnesses. And that's the cool thing, is because initially it goes for Sinister, and it's like, tell me what you think about Jean Grey. Grey, honestly. And Sinister doesn't really love Jean Grey and never really has. When it came to Sinister as a person, his fascination with Jean Grey was based on her genealogy. Remember, the old school basis behind Sinister, despite the fact that it's changed in more recent years, has been that Sinister knew or came to the realization that if Jean Grey and Cyclops were to ever have a child, that child would be godly in terms of power. One of the things he says here is he says, I cloned Jean Grey and I couldn't clone Jean Grey. I made something else several times, some better than others, but none annoyingly better than her. What he's referencing here is when he created Madeline Pryor. Madeline Pryor was the attempt by Sinister to clone Jean Grey. The problem he ran into is he could clone Jean Grey in terms of her physical appearance, but he couldn't clone the essence of what made her who she was, or even her powers. That's why Madeline Pryor was never on the same level as Jean, and that's why she was considered a failed experiment by Sinister. When it comes to Wolverine, it's much simpler than that. Wolverine loves Jean Grey, so he will never speak ill of her because he doesn't see her in any way but a positive light. And that's when everything shifts and you get this amazing moment in this comic. So at that point, the Celestial whisks away Sinister and Wolverine and is like, enough. He says their insight helps. One who loves you and one who envies you. Yes, I think I understand now, or at least I understand enough. I met your husband Cyclops. He implied that I should be scared of you. A man who loves you thinks that something like me should be afraid of you. He is married to something that on a fundamental level scares the hell out of him. Such bravery. Of course, I passed him. He sleeps in the lair of a red dragon, and I think he's right. I think you are like me. Now, this is where things get really awesome, and this is where the Celestial sort of looks at Jean Grey and says, we're similar, but we're starkly different at the same time. He says, and for the love you share and provoke, that is the part I cannot get past. Yes, I am destroying a world, but you destroyed a world for no reason at all. And her response is, Dark Phoenix was not me. It was, but it's really complicated. Now, to explain this, because I imagine a lot of you guys who aren't really familiar with the X-Men mythos are a little confused by this. When Chris Claremont took over writing of the X-Men back in the 70s, his idea was that Jean Grey was a character that had been underutilized in every capacity, but he also wanted to move past the original X-Men team and basically create a team of his own. Hence the reason why he built on Len Wein's giant-size X-Men run. But the idea behind this is that he wanted to elevate Jean Grey to basically make up for how her character had been treated and then ride her out in a blaze of glory. So he gave us the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix sagas, right? Jean Grey attains this godly level of power, she ends up going insane, and then she sacrifices her life for the good of everybody. The problem was that Jean Grey was so ridiculously popular during that time that Marvel editorial made Chris Claremont bring Jean Grey back. But what Marvel did is they said that when Jean Grey initially got the Phoenix Force, that what the Phoenix had done was actually copy Jean Grey, and the real Jean Grey was just sitting in the bottom of Jamaica Bay. She was ultimately discovered by the Fantastic Four, and the Fantastic Four brought her to the X-Men, and then what Marvel established was that when the Phoenix had all that power, it was actually the Phoenix Force pretending to be Jean Grey. When the Phoenix went nuts and became the Dark Phoenix, that it was never actually Jean Grey, it was just the Phoenix had lost its mind and looked like Jean Grey. It was basically a way to exonerate Jean of everything that she'd done. It still holds true. Marvel's never gone back and changed that, and they probably never will. But that's what she's referencing here. Now, the funny thing is the Celestial responds in saying, yes, sometimes you are a saint, Jean Grey, but at other times you are a violent bully. And above all, once you destroyed a world. And that's the thing, like she initially says, and I'm going to destroy you, and the Celestial says, and again, violence. Now, she responds, of course, in making the best argument she can. She says, listen, last month alone, I went to a casino where countless worlds' fates were being wagered on. I saved untold numbers of worlds. If I were keeping score, I'm in the black. And the response of the Celestial is, yes, you went to this place where people were betting on ways to destroy worlds, but your friends would have saved those worlds without you, and they have not burned at all. So basically the response he's making here is, you cannot use that as some kind of a justification for all the terrible things you've done, and said, look, I destroyed an entire world. I killed countless billions, which in reality, she destroyed an entire star system is actually what happened. But like, she's like, you know, yes, I killed all those terrible people, but look at this great thing I did here. I did this great thing here, and that should atone for it. That should make up for it. I've tried to be a hero all this time. And the response of the Celestial is, no, that's not how this works. She asked the question, like, what can I possibly do to make up for this? And the response of the Celestial is, you can never never make up for this, Jean Grey. You are the Phoenix now and forever. And the Phoenix effectively rebonds itself, or seemingly rebonds itself, with Jean Grey in the process. But literally what this means is that Jean Grey, when seemingly she was the Dark Phoenix, what this is Marvel doing is seemingly coming back and saying, actually, that was Jean Grey, right? We're undoing all that stuff where it wasn't actually her. That was Jean Grey. She was the Dark Phoenix. It wasn't the Dark Phoenix replacing her or copying her. That was Jean Grey. And she did destroy that entire star system. She did kill all those people. There's nothing you can do to atone for it. And the actions of Jean Grey over the course of all this time after the events of the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix saga was never about her trying to atone for what she'd done. It was never about her saying, okay, yes, I did that and I'm trying to make amends, right? Because given the various heights of her power, she could have brought those worlds back. She could have returned those worlds during like Phoenix End Song, Phoenix War Song, right? When she was at the peak of her power, when she was in the white hot room, the white Phoenix of the Crown, she could have fixed her past mistakes. But the reality is she didn't, because it was never about atoning for her action. It was never about making up for her past misdeeds. She, like so many of us out here in the real world, it was just about making herself feel better about what she'd done. It was selfish. That's all it was. It was, I did a really bad thing and I want to feel better about the fact that I did it, so I'm going to do a lot of good things and it'll even out, right? Like the scales will be tipped, maybe in my favor, but at the very least, they'll be balanced, right? Like, you know, it won't be as bad, or it won't be so terrible. That's literally what it was. What this progenitor celestial is forcing her to face is the fact that it doesn't work that way. Just because you did a terrible thing does not mean you get to do an equally good thing and everything balances out and all is forgiven and the day is saved. The fact and the reality is you did a terrible thing. You did a horrible thing. It's great that you did a great thing to try to make up for it, but it doesn't change the fact that you did that horrible thing. You cannot atone for this. You cannot make up for this. You can't rinse this blood off your hands. And all the actions that you've engaged in since then have just been selfish actions. So again, it's really amazing here because once Jean Grey snaps back and she's back to her normal self, she actually kind of swears out this blood feud on the progenitor celestial. And what's so ironic about this is she learned nothing from that test. She learned absolutely nothing at all. The basis of the test was to teach her you have to learn to make up for the things that you've done. What she's doing here is she's saying, I'm going to destroy you. In effect, the progenitor celestial confronted her with the reality she doesn't like. And like anybody on Twitter or Reddit or Facebook or just social media in general, she's choosing to reject the reality of the situation that she's in and replace it with one that she finds more agreeable. So she basically lashes out at the celestial and is like, I'm going to destroy you in your entirety. Yes, I am the Phoenix. And yes, I harbor the power of the Phoenix. And by hell or high water, I will destroy you, right? I will end you in your entirety. So it's an amazing comic with a really kind of sad ending for the character of Jean, because again, she learns absolutely nothing. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.